What up? What up? How's everybody doing today? Hope you guys are having a great week. Oh man, this hat is bright. Okay. Uh so happy Friday, Ed. Good to see you.
Hey, we made it.
Yep.
We made
Haven't
it.
seen you too much this week, so good to see you for an hour.
And you're going to see me this weekend too. So good. We're stringing this all together.
The cool thing is my eyes will be focused on the field most of the game. So we'll talk, but I don't plan on seeing you very much.
The scoreboard as it rolls up.
At the end of the fourth quarter, it'll be like 7-3. It'll be a great game.
You're not expecting one of the 70-0 blowouts?
I don't want to become overly optimistic here, so I'm just anticipating that
just a win.
I'm not even getting ahead of myself now. We're 0-3, but offense has been okay, and y'all's offense has not, and our defense has been okay, and so is yours. But I think it'll be a good game. Regrettably, it'll be a good game.
So for those who don't know, our 0-3 Panthers are playing Michael's 0-3 Vikings this weekend.
My team. Yes.
So one of the two of our teams will no longer be winless after this week. So that's a win. How do we both get a win? We play each other.
Nothing like being in the toilet bowl.
That's it.
But yeah, I'm kind of thankful that this game is happening this weekend, because all week long we've had a crazy week. So it's been nice to kind of look forward to something on Sunday. We've had deals go sideways, backwards, upside down, crashed a little bit, and then somehow found its way back onto the road. So that's good. We've got a lot of properties that we are closing on and burring and keeping. So we've been getting a lot of funding requirements taken care of. And when I say we, because we always say we at CLT Buyers, I really mean Ed. So he's been doing a great job with that. But it's been a busy week. We've had a lot going on. We've been to quite a few meetups this week, trying to put our name out and just see everyone, because, we've kind of been, a rut is a terrible word to say, but we've kind of been going to the same meetups for a couple months, and it's nice to kind of spray out a little bit and start going back to some of the ones that we haven't been to in a little bit.
Yeah. So we got to see the team at CLT REI. So Jarrett and Trey, they had their meetup last night. And that was really fun to be at.
Absolutely.
Obviously a really good group of folks that they attract. And so great content there, great networking as well. And then, there was...
You went to the breakfast meetup on Wednesday.
The breakfast meeting on Wednesday, the evening meeting on Tuesday.
The other evening meeting on Tuesday.
The meeting after the evening meeting on Tuesday.
That's right.
So, yeah, I think we hit, outside of our own events, 4 or 5 different meetups this week. So it's been a lot. But also it's always great to connect with our community. So we love it.
Working without feeling like it's working, or working without feeling like it's work. So I will take that all day.
You brought up some things we're working through in the business. Yep. Should we talk about some of those challenges? So the first thing is, as Michael mentioned, in the business, we have a lot of opportunities on the board. I don't know if it's literally, quote unquote, the most ever, because we've done large package deals before and stuff like that. But we do have a lot of opportunities on the board in October. And so if there's anyone out there who's looking to put some capital to work, we'd love to talk with you about the opportunity of placing that capital in a secured position in one of these projects. DM us or DM me directly to have those conversations. We're happy to talk through it. Maybe one of the things that's interesting for us to talk a little bit about, I don't know quite how much detail we can get, and I'll let you give us some guidance on that, but our deal that kind of fell off the tracks, and then we've kind of gotten it back on the tracks. I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. As much specificity as we think we can give, since it's not a completely closed transaction yet.
Yeah.
I don't know what the best way for us to kind of talk through that is.
We can, to your point, it's still an open transaction. So names and, dates, maybe we can take out of this, but maybe just talk about how the transaction didn't
go as
didn't stay on the tracks.
Yeah.
What was a red flag that we noticed? What was a red flag earlier that we missed? and how we were able to correct it.
Yeah. And just a reminder, as we're going through this, if there are any questions, we are looking on the platforms and we're watching for those questions. So definitely drop them in there and we'll try and address them live during this conversation. And if you're watching this after the fact, we're happy to also monitor the comments and share points of view as well. So this transaction really happened how most of our other transactions happened initially. So we had a contract that we were looking for a buyer for, in the wholesale vein of our business, and we found a buyer. We asked that buyer to have some funds placed that were non-refundable. We scheduled a walkthrough. The walkthrough actually happened, and then the some funds were placed in the attorney's office. So generally speaking, that those are both green flags for us, like,
That's
right? I think now one of the things that kind of became what would have been a red flag that we didn't quite notice is that the names between the person we had contracted with and the name on the wire, the sender of the wire, those didn't match, and we might have needed to be a little more critical of that. In that, I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So this deal fell off the rails because we found out that it was being quote unquote daisy chained, which means when somebody has presented themselves as a buyer to us, but then they assign it to other parties. And in this case, it wasn't just one other party, but it was multiple other parties. And not that we would try and avoid that. Not that we would be totally against that happening, but I think one of the challenges for us was that this was happening without our approval, and we didn't know any of the parties. So then communication was becoming very tough as well.
Yeah, just to kind of simplify it a little bit, daisy chaining is something that theoretically it's allowed. We assign contracts, and if the contract doesn't say it's bilaterally required to be assigned, they can do it. And one of the issues that we've always tried to avoid is we want to be the one in contact with the end buyer. And because this property had been daisy chained a couple times, you and I are having communications with people who don't end up being the final buyer, and the final buyer is having conversations with people other than us.
Right.
So there's just a lot of miscommunication going on. And because of that, promises that were made or commitments that were made weren't followed up on, and no one had the whole answer as to why.
And so one of the things that kind of became a warning sign to us as we went through the transaction was we had scheduled an initial walkthrough. That all happened how we expected. But then after that walkthrough, we had scheduled 2 additional walkthroughs that had been requested. And both of those walkthroughs, the quote unquote buyer never showed. So we got kind of stood up on 2 other occasions, which never helped, never's a good look in front of our sellers, of course. Right. We look pretty unorganized when something like that happens. And those are those things.
So this was supposed to close today. This actually was supposed to close a week ago.
Yep.
Then we got an extension.
Yeah.
And then yesterday we found out that they want a longer extension. So without going into too much detail, just what have we deployed as a strategy to help get this back on the ball? And
so the primary thing that we've done to just get things back on track is we've gotten in positive contact with the party who's actually the end buyer on the property, and working with them to really understand what their needs are, what they're trying to accomplish, how they may be able to get this done, what their real requirements are as far as closing timelines, walkthroughs, those types of things. Now that we've really gotten in that type of positive communication, we can immediately meet or not meet those needs in a way that's more positive. So yes, it's gonna take some more time. Yes, we're gonna need to probably sign some additional documentation. which we're in the process of working through now. But I do think we're going to be able to get this project back on track, and I do think we're going to get to closing.
Likewise. And this is the famous story of, yeah, wholesaling's easy. Wholesaling is clean. Wholesaling is a quick transaction. It can be. It absolutely can be. But I think more often than not, expecting some type of a hurdle to overcome, especially close to the finish line, is standard. This type of problem is a little less standard, but we got this. It's not a problem. It's just keeping the seller engaged and not burning out the trust that we've had with them to help get this done. And it'll get done either way. Like, we have backup options, but it's not the number one choice that we want to choose, if possible.
For sure.
So got that. That was all day yesterday prior to office hours. That was a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls not answered. But
I do want to add one more detail on this.
It.
I think one of the primary reasons that actually this deal didn't fall apart is, so we have the team at Queen City Transaction Coordination, Christine and Meredith, who are handling the transactions in the office. In this specific case, this was a file that was assigned to Meredith, and Christine's just kind of looking over her shoulder, making sure everything keeps rolling there. The way that the two of them have made sure to maintain the relationship in this case with the seller in a positive way has made it possible for, when these hurdles have come up, for us to overcome them. And I think that has a lot to do with why this specific transaction stayed on track.
I would agree. One of the benefits of having a service like QCTC, and I want to be clear here. Yes, we own QCTC, but any transaction coordinator is it allows you to take your emotion inside the deal and kind of let someone else take over that from a purely process-oriented way. So when things go sour and you are emotionally involved because you're trying to get the deal closed, that emotion can bleed into your communication with the seller and can potentially throw up another hurdle. So having someone who's emotionally detached from the deal closing, for all intents and purposes, it can be very beneficial to keep that emotion out of those discussions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, first off, Danny, what's going on, brother? Thanks for saying hi. Glad for checking in. Please, anybody else out there, if you have questions, comments, just want to talk anything and everything, please drop them down. We're happy to answer them. But now, since we kind of talked about the hard deal of the week, why don't we bring up one of the easier deals? And I don't want to say easy, because when we did the walkthrough video the other day, it looked anything but easy. But considering how difficult this transaction is to get to the finish line, let's talk about Streamridge and how easy that one should be to get to the finish line.
Yeah. So do you want
me to preface it a bit?
Talk about maybe how we found it and what we did?
Sure.
And then I'll talk about then going to see it this week.
No problem. Okay. So our acquisitions team got a lead that basically the seller had won the property at auction at the courthouse. So he was the winning bid after the upset bid period had ended, and had put his his deposits down to purchase the property. He had too many projects going on, so he wanted to assign his interest in the upset bid to us. And basically what we did is we just cashed him out of the deposit he had at the courthouse and took over the process to close it through the county. One of the really nice things about this is this was a seller who had no attachment to the house. It was just another opportunity for him that was too much on his plate. So he was most focused on just getting his capital back to be able to use it for his current projects. And it allowed the transaction to happen in 4 days. He called us on Thursday, I talked with him on Thursday, and Monday morning, you and I met him at the courthouse to get the assignment of upset bid notarized and recorded with the county. So we're going to be closing on that one in 2 weeks. It looks like mid-October. And we initially thought that this would be a great rental property for us. And it might, but it might not. So maybe you can kind of jump in now and say what's happened since. And I guess the one thing that I'll leave before turning over to you is when you buy properties at auction, getting access to the property before you close can be difficult. It's not something that you can get every time. So when we knew that we were going to be taking on this assignment of upset bid, we knew there was a chance that we wouldn't be able to get into the property before we closed. But because we're buying it at enough of a discount, we were willing to take that risk. But just understand that when we got this under contract, we had never seen the house prior. So I think this would be probably a good time for you to jump in.
Yeah. And, you know, you make a great point that there are some properties where we know that at a certain price, we can price in almost any challenge. And this seems to be a house where we are going to be able to do that. So this is a home that's in a nice area of town, 2,700 square feet, like a maybe a 1990 build or something like that. I don't quite remember, but so it's a nice home.
Yep.
And what we found was we went to go do a drive-by on the property. We were able to actually get into the property. And so I think there are kind of two things that happen. So I'll tell you the bad side of it and then maybe the good side. So the bad side is in gaining access to the home, we discovered that it's first a bit of a hoarder-ish kind of home. There's a lot of items in the home. And in fact, for your discretion here, just if anyone gets grossed out easy, you may want to mute me for just a minute, but it appears that there may be a dog may have been in the property for an extended period of time because it looks like there's a lot of dog feces throughout the home.
Doesn't look like there is. There's a lot.
And so our immediate gut reaction is that's disgusting. I can't believe, and yes,
the smell,
yes,
all the things.
Yes, all those things. And there's no real way to sugarcoat. Yes, that's gross for sure. But if we really talk about a cost to resolve and a time period to resolve, I'd much rather see this type of issue than say a foundation issue. Will it take us a little bit of time and money to get that issue resolved? Are we going to need to pull out carpet? Yeah, probably. All of those things, right?
We're going to do that anyways.
So, but when we're talking about what is additive to the expense and the budget of the rehab, it may not be some prohibitive amount of money that adds.
We junk out all of our homes to clean floors anyways. Clean being there's nothing on them. So regardless, I mean, the junk out crew might charge a little bit more for the fact that they probably have to wear hazmat suits and other things like that. We're going to have to get air filtration and get the house purified. We're going to have to check for mold and other things like that. However, those costs compared to a foundation issue like the one we did on Long a few months ago,
for sure,
I would take this problem 10 times out of 10.
And Long was a small house,
That's right.
mean, a very, very small house in comparison.
Right. 1,400 square foot house with a $40,000 foundation issue. This is not a $40,000.
This is not a $40,000 problem.
So what I would say, of course, is this is also another one of the reasons why utilizing amazing teams in the space can make this job a little bit easier. I think Ed and I would both raise our hands saying we probably don't want to be the ones to clean this mess up. And let's be honest, the people who are cleaning it up probably don't want to clean it up either, but this is the service that they offer and happy to pay them to do a good job, which again, cleaning up a house like this shouldn't take more than a day or two once all the physical things in the property are removed.
Look, picking up, and I'm not trying to be crass about this, but picking up dog poop in a house is an hour and a half job. Yes, it's gross. Yes, nobody wants to do it. It's not ideal. But once that initial feces is picked up, there's other cautions we have to take. Of course, I'm not trying to minimize any of this, but this isn't some rocket science job. It's not terribly impossible to do. It's gross, yes, But when we run into these things, and it reminds me of the deal that we did on Moretz, we walked into that house, smelled disgusting, all the mildew, just all the different things. But then within 2 or 3 days, that issue is resolved. There's still more things to do over there, and we did a great job on Moretz. The project turned out, one of the projects I'm most proud of that we've done. And this project will probably turn out in a similar way.
Yeah. And outside of the gross aspect of the house, there was one other major issue with it. Looks like the subfloor kind of gave in an area that was above the garage or somewhere near there. So that will need to be fixed, and we need to check for some potential water damage that might have caused that. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, because we were able to purchase this at enough of a discount compared to where we're at, this can still absolutely get done. The one thing that maybe changes is our rehab budget compared to, we were anticipating a worst case scenario. This is worse than our anticipated worst case scenario just because of the amount of things that need to be done. But what's changed here is we may not be able to keep this one as a rental anymore. The rehab budget may be too high, and we may have too much capital stuck in the deal. So this one may end up turning into a true fix and flip, and it will still pencil out great as a fix and flip, even with the improved rehab budget. So best case scenario, we still get to keep it, but a worst case scenario is we're still making a decent profit on this after the rehab is done.
And what changes for you and I when we're talking about that, and the reason it's important to discover this now, is we fund our deals through private money relationships and hard money relationships. And it's important that we structure that capital in a way that understands the project timeline. So another project you have right now, Chadsey Lake, which is on the market currently, the timeline for that project is relatively short because it's already on MLS. So we really just need whatever the closing timeline on that project will end up. Well, this one, if our exit is to rehab it and then resell it, we need all of the time it's going to take to rehab it and then the time that it's going to take to sell it in the market. We're going to need that capital available. And then again, if we were going to be keeping it as a rental, we need all of the time for the rehab, all of the time to get it rented in the market, and then whatever seasoning period our lender requires for the exit. So it's just important that we understand the strategy of the deal before we grab the capital, so that then that capital is placed and gives us all the runway that we need for the project. So
couldn't agree more. So that's a little bit more of a simple deal. Obviously, the rehab is not simple. I want to be clear with that, but the acquisition of this property was super clean, and it should be able to go off without a hitch.
Yeah, and I think
we're just working with the county at this point. There's no other parties involved.
Oh, there's one other thing that did come up we didn't quite talk about. So just for the benefit of folks who are watching, so in North Carolina, when there is a foreclosure, there's an attorney who's acting as the trustee for the lender.
That's right.
So in this case, it's a law firm that we've worked with in this capacity before, not on this project, but they perform trustee services for a lot of lenders, and we deal with a lot of foreclosures. So we definitely interact with this attorney's office pretty often. So Christine actually has contact at that attorney's office. So she copies their generic email address and then a more specific one, and is like, hey guys, we're jumping onto this file. We're going to need an accommodation. We're going to need to be clear about your closing timelines. And she was able to work through that. So anyways, just another point where relationships matter, having the right people in your Rolodex matter. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, a lot of projects going on. We could talk about those for the whole hour, but I don't really want to. Why don't we talk a little bit about office hours yesterday? It was creative finance, shocking. We talk about that all the time, even outside of office hours, even during office hours with other topics involved. But creative finance is an unbelievable way to get into properties, especially during turbulent economic times, with high interest rates and low inventory. So had a really robust discussion yesterday. The house was packed at 3:30, which is becoming more common for us, but it was definitely nice to see that people were peeking around the room saying, where can I find a seat?
Bro, at 4 or at 3 o'clock, I went out there at 2:55, and we already had 3 people sitting in the lobby, like the lobby in where we hold office hours in the front of our office. 3 people were already sitting there, like having their own little conversation. And I'm like, wait, are there already, like, I could hear them. So I'm like, are there already people here? And they're like, I walk in, they give me a little head nod. I was like, oh, okay, so we're doing this
And then of course, we went till 5:30 anyways, which is normal. But
every time.
I think for the viewers at home who don't understand or know too much about creative finance, there are 3 main strategies you can utilize, and then there's a ton of caveats and ways to branch off these 3 main pillars. But we have seller financing, which is when there's a mortgage that's created by the seller, so you're paying the seller directly instead of Wells Fargo or Bank of America. There's subject to, which is you are taking over the responsibility for the payments on the mortgage that's already in place. So you don't have to qualify for that mortgage. You just have to be able to make the payments through the arbitrage of the rent. And then there's a lease option, which is basically I rent it for some time, but I gave you a little bit of extra money to have the right to purchase it at a specified price in the future.
And the exclusive right.
The exclusive right. That's a good point. And we don't talk too much about that strategy compared to the others because we want you guys and ourselves to focus on home ownership versus arbitrage in and of itself. But lease option is still a great way to make cash flow and buy a good house if you timed the option contract properly.
That's right.
So we can definitely talk about that after we acknowledge that it looks like our buddy Auric also had a property with similar characteristics of our property on Stream Ridge.
So just to read it real quick, it says, we had a house in Lincolnton. The owners were living there, and when we walked it, there was no shower. There was poop on the floor, and it was terrible. We unfortunately have run into more than one of a property like that. And then the question is, who does our junk out? So we've got a great team. Griffin hauling and
removal.
Yep. I didn't remember what I was thinking about the yeah. So the team at Griffin. If you guys need help connecting with them, definitely let us know. They serve, the whole metro, and yeah, super excited with them and their service. They just helped us on the project on Foxwood, which we didn't even talk about this week, but they were just out at a property for us yesterday or the day before.
Okay, so jumping back, we talked about subject twos and seller financing predominantly, and then we talked a little bit about lease options, and then one other strategy came up as well. But I want to talk more about seller financing and subject to just for a little bit. The biggest question we got yesterday around these two topics is, where do you find these opportunities and how many of them are there? And I can't tell you how many people ask that question. I think it's something that a lot of people want to get done, but aren't really necessarily sure of how to broach the topic. Because as I kind of mentioned yesterday, we have this discussion with every single person we talk to.
Well, so, that was what was interesting yesterday is somebody asked us yesterday, how often do you have these conversations? And your first answer was, I don't know, 25 times in a day or 50 times in a day or 100 times in a day. And that's very literal for us. And I think they thought you were being like sarcastic or whatever. So then we had to clarify and say, look, we're having these conversations. Are you open to creative financing on almost every call we're doing?
The only times we're not asking that is if it starts with, I want to do something creative. So I don't need to ask. But yeah, you should. The discussion maybe isn't 30 seconds even. Sometimes it's a quick one question, one answer response. But if you're not broaching the topic with the seller, you don't know if they would have said yes or no.
I had thought about this yesterday when we were having that dialogue.
Yeah.
I was thinking about like the sarcastic comment is, how many of the people did you not ask that didn't say no to you. Like it's the inverse of that. It's like you think
You
this
got to
is
know for 100% of the people you didn't ask.
that's the
right?
point. Like you only think that everyone's going to tell you no because you've never asked the question. So you've never even given somebody an opportunity to say like I don't know, maybe.
Right. And you've already done the hard part. You called them. That's the biggest hurdle people have getting over, is actually taking the action and making the calls. Once you have them on the phone, you get to ask as many questions as you want until they tell you to stop. And being able to have a discussion where they make more money no matter what is a pretty cool conversation to have. They may not want more money because it may not be the most important thing in their life, but we should at least see where the value lies in their world.
I think we're always trying to coach folks that they may be best served by not trying to look at it through the paradigms of how we think about things and try and understand why the owner of this property would consider selling for other reasons. And the more of the situations that we run into, the more we learn that it's not always because they want the biggest pile of money right this minute. There's all sorts of problems that get solved by trading a property to someone else.
Yeah. I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday as well. One of the paradigm shifts, I believe, is that everyone who's selling their house needs to sell it for money. And I think one of the big things is there are many people in this world who are well off and they don't need the sale of that property to keep their lives going as currently is. So if selling a property is more of a luxury than a necessity for you, help them turn that into an investment immediately. Help them earn money on that money if they don't need it for basic living expenses. So you're actually solving a problem and offering a solution to a different problem in the same transaction,
That's
which
right.
is hard to quantify how valuable that is.
And generally speaking, those returns are substantial compared to other options in the market. Often in interest rates centered around real estate transactions are somewhere between 8, 10%. Well, we were just sitting in our bank and they were advertising a rate of like 3 something. So, comparatively, those rates are very competitive.
Absolutely. And it's just mailbox money. You don't need to think about anything. It's just cash that check, baby. So, okay. Obviously, we know that these solutions can be advantageous for a homeowner, but maybe go in a little bit to the subject to world of how this can be a life raft for families as well.
I mean, the thing about subject to is that's an opportunity where we're going to take ownership of the property and the debt stays in the borrower's name. And then we begin making payments on that debt over time.
So deed is in our name, mortgage is in the old seller's name, and you are responsible for making payments on that seller's mortgage, even though it's attached to your property.
Yes.
Okay.
And generally speaking, when you're doing a subject to, what you're going to do is put a renter in that property. They're going to make a rental payment. You're going to collect that rent and you're going to send some of it off to the bank. Like that's just generally how that transaction works. And I think what we've seen enough times is this is not necessarily the most ideal scenario for a seller. I think that's very clear. If a seller could go into the market and sell their home free and clear and get sent tens of thousands of dollars, that's not only in their best interest, but that's what they should do. And actually in our sales process, that's what we recommend. The subject to is a deal that often comes up when they can't sell for some amount of equity.
Why would that happen?
Maybe they recently purchased the home. Maybe the home needs some type of updating before it can be prepared for the market. Another thing that the subject to we find as well is maybe the family has to relocate for a job and the job is time sensitive. Like we had somebody who was moving to DC recently who we
Yep.
were talking to. And she had to be there, like, I think like the first of this month, or, when timing is just really of the essence and they don't have time to get it prepared. They don't want to manage a sales process from a distance. There are other things though, death, divorce, those are other scenarios that um, maybe there were a couple that was bearing the burden of this payment, and then all of a sudden one of those partners isn't available to help continue making this payment, and all of a sudden that's all on one person's shoulders. That same scenario can happen if someone was to pass away. So there's a lot of reasons why picking up this burden, last burden can be, maybe it's a sibling or a parent who owns the home, and that person passes away, and then all of a sudden it's on the family to try and keep this house out of foreclosure or something like that. So there's a lot of scenarios where families may not have the option of just putting the property in the broadest market and getting it paid off free and clear.
I want to clarify something. They do have the option. They always have the option to do that. However, it doesn't mean that putting it on the market will get a sales price above what they owe, considering the condition of the home. It doesn't mean that it will sell in the time frame that they need it to get sold to solve their other more time sensitive problems. So these people have that option, but at some point it becomes a worse option than a subject to.
That's right.
Okay. So these people need help one way or another, whether it's financially or time sensitivity or any of the other things you just explained. Now the question becomes, as circling back, how do we have these discussions from a subject to world with every person we talk to? Because we do,
Yeah.
even though we know maybe of 100 sellers, maybe 5 will be interested in seller finance and maybe 1 will be interested in subject to, but we still bring it up every time and maybe talk about how and why we do that.
Yeah. So in our sales process, I think there are really 3. I mean, we have a whole conversation. It takes some time, but there's really 3 points we're going to bring up. We're going to say, look, we think if you were to sell your house in the market today at the top retail number, this is probably what you're going to get. And we help them understand what that number probably is. And then we may help them understand what amount of work we think it's going to take from the value that the home currently is to get to that point. And then we're going to suggest if we do that work, we're probably a buyer at a different lower number. And then the opportunity to, whether it's seller financing or subject to, is to say, my quote unquote cash price is down here, but I might be able to come up a bit. And you may actually get to walk away with a little more equity than selling at my cash number if we did a deal in a different structure. And one of the reasons why that's advantageous for us, and by default we can offer more money, is not having to go out and raise the capital can add some efficiencies in our business as well.
Exactly. So we tell them, hey, why aren't you listing this on the market? If you put in the $40,000 that we feel this house needs, and please talk to other people about those numbers as well, but you could get this. You could get X in the market. But what we find out is maybe they don't want to take on that project. Maybe they don't have the capital to take on that project. So even though they understand and know what they can get, they realize that that's not a true reality for them in this moment. It's not the best scenario for them.
Or it's not how they're prioritizing.
That's a
They're
better way of
just
saying it.
choosing not to prioritize that need, where the timing need, the need to no longer, some homes have emotional connections. Some homes are causing just distress to the person. Some homes may have legal ramifications to continuing to hold it, and they just want to get those things resolved.
Right. So then once we realize that that isn't an option for them, we are going to discuss a cash price to purchase it from them. And many times that cash price, because we need to get a return on that entire purchase price investment, it requires us to be at a bit more of a discount. Whereas if, let's just say they say no to that cash offer number, I can offer you more if you're open to payments over time or me taking over your mortgage because the return on my initial capital is greater because the initial capital needed is lower.
That's right.
So it can be advantageous either way. If we're offered a property for $100,000 cash that's worth, or let's just say we can buy it for 100K and it's worth 200K when it's all fixed up, or we can offer 150,000 on seller finance and both get accepted. Both of those are great deals. So it comes down to which strategy do you want to implement? Are you doing seller finance just to get into the transaction, or are you doing it to hold long term? And all of these different thought processes on the exit help you determine which way to enter.
I think going off that last point you were making there, and you made a great point about this at office hours, was this idea that the subject to deal is a great way to enter into a transaction. But if it's one we're going to keep long term, seller financing is a better structure, because if it's sub 2, we probably will exit that over some period of time.
A sub 2, the terms are stuck. Like, I mean, I could do a loan mod, but there's no benefit to doing that compared to where I took it over currently, most likely, especially in today's interest rate environment. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to being able to take over that property subject to for the entrance. But one of the cool things about seller financing is because the seller agreed with you on the terms, not just the swap of cash, he or she is aligned with the time frame that you had. So there's going to be less friction there over the time on aggregate.
And if either of the parties, you or the seller, wanted to adjust those terms by virtue of negotiation between the two parties in the seller finance case, you two could choose to adjust those terms if it was mutually beneficial for the two of you.
That's right.
So that would include payment price, that would include interest rate, that would include the time period, all of those different things.
Yep. Okay. So we discussed subject to, we discussed seller financing. We're going to avoid lease options, but let's talk about wraps. Wraps was a large part of the discussion yesterday because it's a cool tool, but it's still not one that you and I would choose as a first case scenario. And the reasoning, at least on my end, for that is because you don't maintain home ownership. You don't get the benefits of home ownership on a wrap. However, maybe just explain what a wrap is, explain the benefits of a wrap, and then maybe some of the potential drawbacks with a wrap.
Sure. So when you purchase a property under primarily seller financing is the most often the most often form of where this would happen. You can then sell this property to another party on a separate note on a different set of terms. And so kind of just for simplicity, I could buy a home for 100,000 and sell it for 200,000 and collect the differential between the payments that are inferred by those different purchase prices and the different interest rates that may be inferred and the amortization periods. And we probably don't need to go into specifics kind of number wise there, but I think we can understand that the payments on 100,000 would be smaller than the payments on 200,000, and kind of that's how those things work. And what you and I shared is, while we don't prefer to often give up the ownership interest in a property because we prefer the appreciation, we prefer the tax benefits, all of those different things, there are cases where we will sell a property on a wrap. It's often if it's geographically undesirable for us, so it's in a market that is too far away or that we don't want to try and manage from a distance, or the property can be in substantial disrepair. So if that's the case, we'll sell on a wrap in that case as well.
Okay. So you acquire it at some terms, and then those terms become inflated slightly to be able to arbitrage that benefit, and it's sold to somebody else who maybe couldn't get bank financing, maybe wants to work on a house on their own to rehab it to live in. A lot of these wrap scenarios are for people who may struggle get traditional financing due to lower credit scores or other things like that.
Yeah, or we did a deal. Was it in Fort Mill? I think it was in Rock Hill or Fort
Rock
Mill.
Hill.
Rock Hill, where we had a flipper who does great work. We actually ended up selling it to her on a wrap just for the time period of her rehab, which allowed her to do a project without really having to bring any of the capital to fully like buy the property. I mean, she made a down payment and those things, but she didn't have to bring the bulk of the money to purchase the property. And then when the property sold at retail, our note got paid off. So that was a really cool transaction.
Very cool transaction. And I just want to clarify, it's not like the only people who buy these properties have trouble getting financing. It's also a great opportunity for people who are consistently getting outbid on the MLS or don't have the down payment requirements for a property on the MLS, right? Like the average property here in Charlotte is over $430,000 now, I believe. And unless you're an FHA buyer, you're probably bringing, I don't know, at least 10% down. So you're talking about $43,000 down. That can be a tough amount. But if you're looking for opportunities on seller finance, I know people who have rehabbed homes and then sold them on seller finance just so that they can get away from the management of the asset. So I tell a lot of my friends, outside of real estate circles, if you're looking for a house, start offering seller financing at a slightly inflated rate and get in without a $40,000 down payment.
Yeah, and one of the kind of approaches you can do is most MLSs throughout the nation have a field that is
this is a good point.
Yeah. Well, hey, I made one. Most of the MLSs across the nation have a field that describes the seller's quote unquote preferred financing methods. Often those are going to list things like cash, VA, FHA. Almost, I can't say every because I haven't reviewed every, but every
There are
MLS,
plenty of properties out there.
every MLS I've reviewed has in that field seller financing as an option. So, for example, if you go into the MLS that serves the Charlotte market, there's like 70 plus properties that would pop up under that search. Now, for sure, some of those are not going to be a fit for us because the seller means, oh, I'll finance 5% or 10, like they'll do something like that. But for sure, out of that 70 properties, one or two of those are going to fit this model.
And that's only one keyword. I know you searched a few keywords. What are some other examples of descriptors on MLS properties that may point to a seller finance deal?
Yeah. So you can look at the proposed financing or whatever that field happens to be called in the MLS system that serves your market. You can look there. The other opportunity you can do is actually look in the property descriptions and look for the word seller financing, owner financing, investor special, rent to own. Those are all opportunities. Sell quickly, distressed, all of those, even things like make it your own, so there's a whole list of, TLC,
OBO,
right,
or best offer.
Right. So yeah, or best offer is a good one because it's saying, look, we know we may not get what we're asking for. Well, there's an alternative for you to come in and give what they're asking for, the whole
or more,
your price, my terms thing, right? So I can meet you at your price if you can let me make payments over time to meet that number.
So you have the benefit of doing this because you are an agent, so you have MLS access. But what about the people out there who don't have MLS access? What can they do to get this information?
I think they can find really outstanding real estate agents who they can even coach how to do this, right?
Do you think the Collective Realty team might be able to do that?
Yes, for sure. Our agent locally, Andrea, does a great job for us. So Collective Realty is our primary listing agent.
I'm not saying she'll do it for free. I didn't mean to inundate Andrea with work, so sorry about that, Andrea.
But I think if you build relationships that are valuable, this type of data can be pulled pretty easily. And in fact, in a lot of MLS systems, just as an aside, a lot of MLS systems, I think you could probably automate this. So every, the first of every month, it sends you this detail. Last point to add on that type of search is just make sure you're looking at properties that have been on the market for a little bit of time. Doesn't have to be a long period of time, but if they've come on the market 2 days ago, it's unlikely that they're going to probably have the flexibility for what you're looking for.
Why is that?
They just haven't had enough. When I come on the market, I'm thinking I'm going to get the number that I've listed at, and I may need some feedback from the market over time to tell me that that number is inflated before I'm willing to consider something other than just a full offer.
Gotcha. So just ballpark, what do you think is a good time frame to start reaching out?
45 days in today's market. Yeah, I'd look for anything that's been on the market over 45 days. Even better for you is if you can see that they've given a price concession or two on their list price. That might be an indication of motivation. You and I have used that before as an indication of motivation. So those are the things I would look for.
Look at for expired listings as well. So, properties are pulled off for a few different reasons. Expired listings can be a great indicator. The one thing I would caution you with is determine how long they were on the market for in the first place. So I pulled a list of expired listings the other day, and I think it was about 25 properties. It wasn't anything big, but of the 25, 18 of them were on the market for 2 days or less before they got pulled off. That isn't enough time. Something happened, and either they immediately pulled it down to correct it, which tells me they are not in pain and they have flexibility to fix things, or there was some potential disagreement, or there was some change in plans based off of the initial few days of market feedback. Maybe they decided to hold on to it because they weren't getting offers. Who knows? But
the job offer they were chasing may have fallen through. Like there's something that changed about strategically where they were going.
Right. So I still think the time frame matters. If they weren't on the market for at least 30 to 45, probably 45 plus days, I personally, and it sounds like you as well, don't feel that they've had enough feedback to adjust. I would want to wait at least 30 days personally before I adjusted. So
for sure,
I can understand.
I think the only other thing we just mentioned, just for the benefit of those watching, is some MLS systems will so they'll describe situations differently. So for example, if it was on the market for a very short period of time and then pulled off, some MLS systems will describe that as withdrawn, which just means it didn't go to the end of the listing agreement. Where expired, it often indicates it got to the end of whatever period the seller and the agent agreed to have it listed.
Right. So in MLS lingo, that may be, but I can tell you now in lead purchasing world, they are the same.
They're the same.
So look out for that.
Just be on the lookout. So if you see a withdrawn, it just means that the seller took some type of action to have it pulled off MLS. And if it says expired, it often reaches the end of that agreement period. Not all systems describe it that way. Sometimes they're just called expired in general. But
what else, bro?
I think that's it, man. Other than that, we get to chase a couple more things for a few hours, and then we get to go see a Panthers-Vikings game, circling it all the way back. How you doing in fantasy football?
Depends on the league. In our Charlotte league, I am 1-2.
Okay.
Started strong, 1-0, and then gone off the cliff the past couple of weeks. But it's early in the season. I'm not trying to do what Philadelphia Eagles fans do and pretend that week 3 means that they've already won the Super Bowl. Shout out to Adam. But other than that, we have had a slow start to the fantasy season. I'm waiting patiently for Jonathan Taylor to come back.
In fact, I think if we look at in our real estate league, there's a bunch of us who I think we're on our 3rd year or something.
Yep.
So a lot of the folks who have done well the last 2 years are struggling a little bit early on. So Diana's made clear to me a couple of times that she's outperforming me in our league. So she's pleased with that. And I think she's projected to win again this week.
Okay.
So I don't know.
We're celebrating the end of the race on lap 5.
Evidently. Oh, Solomon, if you're watching this, I was supposed to remind you, check your trade window. Check your trade window.
Don't do it. It's a
Don't
bad
do
trade.
it. Oh, and Eric, I have a trade out to Eric right now. So
So
Eric,
I don't know if you've ever watched Part of My Take. You probably haven't at Barstool podcast, but
is it meant to be funny?
it's which means
then
that you're definitely not watching.
definitely not watching it. No, I've seen it. I have seen
So
it.
they have this bit where they constantly try to talk about fantasy football teams with people, but it's just a well-known fact that if you partake in fantasy football, you don't care at all about hearing other people brag about their fantasy teams because you're in the middle of it too, right?
That's right.
So they'll always ask people, "Oh, how's fantasy going?" And then as soon as they start talking about, "Yeah, we don't care. We don't care." So
how's fantasy going?
no, we don't.
We don't care.
Well, we do have that group chat that keeps it going, which is fun. But when everyone's like, "Oh, big win this week," a lot of time left.
It's also one of those things, and you and I are both in multiple leagues, so we're celebrating. For example, like Diggs went off in my league until the guy I'm playing in the other league has him, and I'm just like, I need you to get 27.4 points, but 28's too much.
Start rooting against your own players. It's not fun.
It's not fun.
So
wait, one last thing, because this is important. You got killer tickets for the game, bro. Like, you got really great seats. I know you've been watching this all week.
Hold on.
I have been hounding you about this.
To put a tally in this, that this is the first time CLT Buyers has ever done something where Ed used the word "you" instead of "we." So we got some amazing tickets this morning. They were actually from the section that you pointed out, but I did click submit on the payment button. So yes, I got the tickets, I guess, with the company card. So I don't know where this goes.
We something. But I was pressuring you to buy these like a week ago or something, and you're like, I think we're gonna be okay. And then this morning we jump on there and got really great seats at a great value. I'm excited about it.
We're paying for 0-3 versus 0-3, so I kind of have that feeling. But no, we're good. I mean, shout out to the viewers today. You guys were really active. We appreciate you guys jumping in.
All the crazy engagement
today. But I have a feeling we'll get a couple comments in the replays. So we'll kind of keep a lookout for those and maybe answer those next week. One other thing we'll do, maybe just to add a little bit of engagement here, is we'll put out a story early next week and maybe start asking some questions that we can answer live here, so that you can be beneficial from getting answers from the audience, even if you aren't able to join live.
Okay. Where can they find you over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah. So we have our monthly exchange meetup at Hopfly Brewing on October 12th, which is a Thursday, from 7 to 9 p.m. We've got the Duru in the house.
Nassar's coming through.
Excited. Obviously, I know you're very well connected and have known Nassar for a while. I've kind of known him in proxy through you, but really excited to finally meet him and have him share his really inspiring journey and all the stuff he's going to talk about. So we've got that on October 12th. Definitely come out and support him and us, please. But other than that, we have the Self-Directed IRA Summit on October 20th and 21st. I think the 20th is really just a networking session, but 21st all day, it's self-directed IRAs and being able to put your retirement funds to work to earn money through secured real estate. I'll be speaking on a panel there with a couple other real estate investors going over deals we've done with self-directed funds. And I just think it's an incredible opportunity for people who are looking to raise private capital to learn a little bit more about how these retirement accounts work and how people in their circle can use these custodians like Directed IRA to help them on their investment journey. So really excited about that too.
And I know it is late in Power Hour, but if you have watched to this point and you have not purchased a ticket to that event,
we got a promo code.
DM us. We will get you guys the promo code, and we'll get you guys there. I know they still have some tickets available. I think VIP is sold out, but there's still general admission, and we want to see you guys there. So
Do we have anything else other than that? I don't believe so. We have, of course, other meetups in the space that we'll be going to over the next month. It sounds like there's going to be some holiday events coming up soon from a couple of our friends in the space too. So we got a lot to look forward to. Of course, you guys know we do office hours every Thursday and we're here every Friday. So don't be a stranger. Come say hi, ask us anything you want answered, and we will do our best. So until next week, for me and you, not we, this has been CLT Buyers Power Hour. Thank you guys so much for joining, and go Vikings.